Into and Across the Spider-Verse are some of the most iconic and unique looking animated films of the past decade, with so many mesmerizing animation techniques and unique characters, alongside their universes. So with the release of the new Spider-Verse minifigures, I asked myself, what would some of these universes look like in the Lego world? So I chose 5 of my favorite figures, and with the magic of stop motion, we're going to animate a short scene for each one of them. So let's start off with none other than our man, Miles Morales. And for him, I want to animate a short clip where he barely misses his train to school, and then has to use his spider abilities to catch up to it before he defeats a villain blocking the road with his venom blast, just like in that one scene in Across the Spider-Verse. So I built this little train station, as well as the train wagon itself, and this place is looking super cozy, which means we're ready to get animating. And the first of Spider-Verse's animation techniques we'll utilize is to animate on 24 FPS on 2s. That simply means that the characters are switching poses every second frame, so they're essentially moving at 12 FPS, creating the signature choppy Spider-Verse look. And having this more cartoony feel is a super fun discipline. And right away, we'll also make use of another cool technique, smear frames. Those are all the frames with the little lines and other freaky shenanigans, which emphasize the speed of movements. And I made those with some flat tiles that match the color of Miles, creating this awesome cartoony touch. So after suiting up, Miles catches the train and sneaks inside through the window. But before Miles can get too comfy, his spider sense is tingling and... oh, wait a second. Yeah, now we're talking. Because there's some maniac blocking the road. So let's get ready for combat. And as you can see, the new super cool Miles minifigure has these lightnings, referencing the scene where he venom blasts Miguel. I animated Miles taking off his hoodie to reveal his new lightning attire, to jump off the train and shocking the dork blocking the way. But this still looks very bland, as it's obviously lacking Miles' cool signature shock effects. So I used some of my video wizardry to create these lightnings. You don't want to know how long this took to make. So this is all for the animation side of things, but there are still a few tricks to make everything look more like a living comic book. First up are the halftone patterns that are all over the place, and they're even on the minifigures themselves. So I added some of those really subtly. And also the subtle chromatic aberration color offset that is happening for anything that's not in focus. So that's basically the same thing from the TikTok logo for all of you fellow kids. Both of which reference the way printed comics looked like back in the day. Then there are also the iconic yellow caption boxes that we have to include, and also
onomatopoeia.
Yeah, that. Which are stuff like boom, whoosh, blah blah blah, bing. Yeah, you know what I mean. Spider-Verse has also those unique moments that go 100% comic book, and I obviously had to create something like that as well. And with all those secret comic ingredients, our Miles clip is finished. So please have a look. Awesome, so next up is a contender for the objectively coolest Spider-Person, and that is of course Spider-Gwen. The main thing of her universe is how the colors change depending on Gwen's emotional state. So I want to make a scene of her having a rough day before she sees the photo of her and Miles, which brightens up her state of mind again. Oh, and guys, do you remember the scene of Miles and Gwen vibing in the clock tower in Miles' dimension? With this absolutely phenomenal shot of Gwen walking across the edge? Yeah, alright, what if we made this exact shot in Lego form in Gwen's dimension? Huh? So I got to work building a Gwen version of the clock tower that Gwen is going to swing onto, and using my monitor, I displayed Gwen's universe in the background, perfectly set the vibe. And when animating, I really tried my best to give Gwen's web slinging the grace of a ballerina. Alright, but how do we tackle this monstrosity of a shot? Well, moving the camera around the edge of the building is not gonna work, so we'll have to find another way. So as a solution, I built this platform that is able to rotate around for Gwen to walk along. The only issue was that the width of the platform is way bigger than its height, which means that Gwen's position on the screen would get a lot higher, which isn't great because Gwen needs to remain locked in the center for this to look clean. So I whipped out my beloved, literally Lego rig, with which I can adjust the platform's height, meaning we can have Gwen perfectly in center at all times. But when it comes to the background, my first intention was to use a green screen, but you can see the green's reflection on top of the tiles, which ruins everything. So there's no other way than taking the monitor and making a video of the city turning around and moving this video forward a few frames at a time while I'm animating Gwen. Sounds insanely stupid? Yeah, that's because it is. But did I make it? Nope, I totally messed up the timing of the background and had to cut the foreground out in post to then insert the background properly again. So much fun. Now all that's left to do is to do all of the color shenanigans, so I recolored this scene to fit Gwen's blue mood and switch between the versions with a simple transition. And that's all for Gwen, so here's the finished result. Next up is the Webslinger. He only appears in the movie super briefly, so it's gonna be very fun to imagine what his Old West universe might look like. And he only comes with this little pony instead of his regular horse, but I luckily got more than enough proper horsepower. Now all that's left to do is to open up Photoshop to stitch together a cool horse mask, print it onto some sticker paper, and there goes our majestic spider steed. And after giving the Webslinger a better torso and replacing this random lasso with a revolver, our iconic duo is fully assembled. So let's get to making the actual scene. And for a western themed spider adventure, I wanna go for the idea of Webslinger stopping a classic train robbery. I assembled a neat desert scene, complete with cacti, cattle skulls, and some of the iconic mountain formations. And I got one of these super cool old sets from the Lone Ranger, which comes with a perfect Wild West locomotive, making our wild frontier look sharp. Now to get the locomotive moving, we're gonna keep it stationary in the center, and we'll move the background instead. So I fixated a ruler onto the table with some sticky tack, so that the base plates can seamlessly slide alongside it, allowing me to precisely move the background the same amount for each frame, so everything looks consistent. So let's start making the actual animation of Webslinger and his steed stopping the train that was hijacked by none other than Baron Otto Octavius. And since the horse has the usual spider abilities, including crawling on walls for some reason, we might as well use that and do something epic like the horse galloping on the side of the train. But can you guess how I made this shot? Well, dear ladies and gentlemen, the answer is C. Yeah, you probably guessed it, there are just two bricks underneath the horse that keep it in the air, that you can't see from the camera's point of view. And after successfully ambushing Baron Octavius with his sneaky move and removing him from the train, the Webslinger challenges him to a quick draw duel. Just like in his brief appearance in Across the Spiderverse. And there's of course a reason for me choosing specifically Doghawk as our western villain. And that's because I found the idea of him wielding 4 weapons with his robot arms at a quick draw absolutely hilarious. And also a f***ing pain in the ass to animate. A general rule of thumb for you guys, the more limbs something has, the more tedious it is going to be to animate. And finally in the post-production, I give everything a nice orangey high noon look, which means that our adventure in the wild frontier is all finished. So please, have a look. Count of 3. Draw. 1. He didn't wait till 3. And if you want to see me make more insane LEGO animations, absolutely make sure to smash those like and subscribe buttons. Okay, remember how I mentioned that a 24 FPS obtuse thing that Spider-Verse utilizes for most of its characters is already rather special? Well, our next character, Hobie motherfucking Brown aka Spider-Punk, is an entirely different beast, because this fella isn't animated primarily on 1s, or 2s, or 3s, no, he regularly switches between all of them, sometimes completely at random. Check this out. The scene I want to reference when making our LEGO animation is the one of his first entrance. And I went through it frame by frame and found that this shot of him on running is mostly on 1s, this shot is a weird mix of 1s and 2s, these two shots are primarily on 2s, whereas this last one's animated on 3s. Huh? And many animated characters have some frames on 1s or 2s every now and then to emphasize certain motions, but not to this extent. And if that alone wasn't freaky enough, Hobie and his guitar also randomly switch art styles every few frames. In his 1 second shot alone, he goes from red to pink and finally black and white. And also whenever Hobie strums his guitar, there's also all of this stuff going on. TLDR, Hobie is by far the craziest and single most unhinged character in any animated movie ever. Seriously, who came up with all of that? Okay, so how are we gonna turn all of that into a LEGO stop motion animation? Yeah, I'm not gonna incorporate everything I just mentioned because I'm not a masochist. And on top of that, I want to do as many of these shenanigans physically, with paper on set, in true punk rock fashion. You know, all this new AI garbage over the past few months has kinda made me fall in love so much more with authentic, physical craftsmanship, so I really wanna craft as much for real as possible for this one. I started with the shots of his boots running, which took some patience because it's animated mostly in 24 FPS on 1s, but nothing too crazy so far. I made a bunch of different outlines for the guitar out of paper, to have the art style changes represented here. And then I wanna do this drum right here. Yep, now stuff is getting freaky, so let me break it down for you real quick. Here's the punk rock poster snippets, these lightnings, this pink star shape and some bigger lightnings, all of which we're going to craft physically. So I printed out some of these punk pattern sheets of paper that I made in Photoshop, out of which I cut out the lightnings and the star thingies. Then I got to animating, and while Hobie is only moving on 3s, all of the paper cutouts are moving and shifting independently on 1s, so managing all the stuff was something else. Are you beginning to see why all of this was a dumb idea? And lastly, for the punk poster snippets, I made all sorts of snippets out of magazine I had lying around at home and assembled them in a similar fashion to the movie. There's 2 of these cutout frames, so I made another one. Please note that these will only be visible for 2 frames each. I scanned those in as JPEGs, so this is gonna be the only element we'll add in later digitally. And the second guitar strum is pretty much the same thing, for which I additionally made this newspaper star shape, an orange outline for Hobie, a yellow outline for the guitar, and these pink bolts right here. The animation for this one was just as daunting as the last, but at least Hobie isn't jumping in the air this time.
So let's see how this looks. Yo, this looks sick! Yeah.
And as a final flourish, I also want to have these tiny lightnings. I individually drew those frames onto a piece of paper, like a 2D animator, and also scanned those in. And after inserting all the elements we scanned in, masking out the abundance of wires holding everything in the air, and very few digital flourishes here and there, our Spider-Punk clip is finally done. So please, have a look. And yep, out of all of the animations of this video, this one took the longest to make. Even though it's only 10 seconds long. And for our final character, I picked one of the absolute fan favorites, which is of course, Spider Kitty! He only appears for this one moment in the film, but that was more than enough to capture all of our hearts. And I want to do something special for this scene, as I want to make my own version of the moment when Spider Kitty learned that with great power there must also come great responsibility. And as a fitting villain, I introduce to you Venom Kitty. Venom Kitty can also transform into this thing, so stay tuned for that. I'm also using some black clay to create these morphing Venom tentacles. Except that this clay that I've got here is absolute trash, and the last time I used it for a Venom animation a few years back, the black clay left behind those stains on the road plate that are still visible years later. So I gotta be more careful today. Oh, and fun fact, Spider-Cat's nemesis in the comics is actually Venom Pigeon. So that's also cool, I guess. Speaking of comics, I really had so much fun with all the comic shenanigans in the Miles animation we made today, so I feel like using the same vibe for Spider Kitty. Also, remember how in some superhero movies, the hero has to save a cat from a tree? Yeah, with the cat being the hero, the roles obviously need to be reversed. And you know what, I've been yapping a whole lot today, and I don't want to spoil too much of my incredible and super deep story, so please have a look for yourself.
Spider Kitty, help me!
And this is the moment when Spider Kitty learned that with great hunger for fish, there must also come great responsibility.
So that was the final scene for today. Now go and let me know in the comments below which spider animation was your favorite. And be sure to also check out this video where I recreated Jurassic Park's T-Rex scene with Lego. And of course, a super huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters: Kiesel1503, Adel, Ellie Bells, Okram DHS, The Mallard Kid, Moldy Bricks YT, and Doomiak. Thanks a whole lot for supporting the channel, you guys. So that's all for today, folks. See you soon and lots of hugs. Bye.